Try to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rotten about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's only one I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And take that away.
You know, that's my take on it. What's yours?
Protonic reversal.
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It is a scientific fact. We are all up in your face. It is time, once again, for the one, the only Protonic reversal. Welcome to it. Episode 200 and... 200 and... So I think that's about accurate, right? At this point, 203? 204? Is this 204 now? Maybe it's 204. I should look and see. Always know what you're talking about before you go on air. That's what I say. This is 204. Yeah, 204. Ed Fraser from Heads today. So thank you so much for tuning in, for downloading, for viewing, for whatever manner of thing you are enjoying this particular experience on. It's always appreciated. Housekeeping here. Thanks, folks. Sharing things around. If you listen to the show regularly, well, first of all, there's the Patreon, patreon.com/Protonic Reversal. $1 a month will get you where you need to be to hear all the episodes sooner. So a lot of people have asked about their favorite episodes. You know, why can't I listen to this episode or that episode? It's not on my feed. Well, you need to pay money for that. And otherwise, be patient. Pay money or be patient. Those are the choices. And for those that don't want to do that and you listen on the free feed, if you don't already, consider subscribing. Believe it or not, it helps people find the show. And that's a wonderful thing for everyone, really. And what helps people find the show even more is when you share it around. And I hate hearing like and subscribe, but that is the way we have decided that we want the world to work. So if you like an episode, send it to a friend, send it to an enemy, send it to a frenemy. You know, all of these things will work. But don't keep it a secret. That's it. You know, a lot of people have said a lot of really nice things. Thank you very much. And it's awesome to know that folks are out there and listening to this weird little show. But, I guess let's keep it going if you can. And I'm going to try to keep it going if I can. Sounds like a plan. So, Ed from Heads coming up. Looking forward to talking to that fella. And let's listen to some Heads right now. This is Weather Beaten.
Coming around, hanging out on your porch.
All right, that's Weather Beaten by Heads. That's off of the new one, Push. This is Push You Got to See. Yeah. Okay, that was some Heads with It Was Important. Before that, Push You Got to See. All those are on the excellent Heads record, Pull.
Hey, Conan. How you doing?
Thanks so much for making the time, man. I know it's time zones being what they are. It's a little bit different doing something in the evening for the Yanks, as you probably call them, which always sounds masturbatory to me, but you know.
The Yankers. Yeah, it's a nice sunny spring morning for me here in Melbourne, so that's a little different. Yeah.
So I was playing some tunes off of the record Push, your most recent record, which I quite like. One of the things that I like a lot about it too is that you have all the information right on the album cover, which I think is sort of like a lost art. Like I feel like they're like jazz records and things that would do that, way back when. But it's just not something you see very much. And was that like an aesthetic choice where you're like, hey, let's just go full on pragmatic and useful with this album art rather than high art and things along those lines? And I say that because I have there's some records I love where it's like I would love to know what album this is and who it's by, but apparently everyone's too artsy fartsy to give that information out.
yeah, it's kind of the opposite of that, I guess.
It's high function. There's four-man function, but it's high function.
Yeah. The designer's a guy called Fabian Bremer, and he's based in Leipzig in Germany, and that was his concept and his idea. But yeah, I like it because the rest of the record artwork has very little, basically no information on it whatsoever.
Right.
So you just get everything on the front, the lyrics, who's on it, the whole deal. And like aesthetically, Fabi is a book designer, so most of what he's doing is...
Now that you say that totally makes sense, because it is kind of got a book design sort of element to it. How interesting. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Like most of what he's doing is like typesetting and stuff. And he's won awards and stuff for book design in Europe. So to me, it almost looks like a newspaper, you know?
I could see that as well. Yeah, it's definitely got like you got your headline, which is the name of the record, and you got your like the A and B side would be like your opinion columns or something along those lines. My favorite, there was because even though I live in Milwaukee now, but I'm from the Bay Area, like I'm from California. And the day after 9/11, not a jovial day as you might imagine, but the second-tier San Francisco newspaper, which was known for its, I'll just go and say cheekiness generally, had a 72-point headline that just said bastards.
Yeah, right.
as the headline, which at the time was not funny at all, but I was like, I'm going to acknowledge that's going to be funny someday.
Yeah.
Because it's just bastards.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in this case, the bastards would be the name of the record, which is Push. Cool record. I'm still somewhat flabbergasted by how your band operates, and I'm kind of curious. I think most band origin stories are very boring, but I'm very curious how it came to pass that you're multi-continent.
Yeah, that's like, man, at the moment, being multi-continent is pretty much impossible to work.
Rough business. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so at the moment, the band's not really able to operate, unfortunately. But yeah, it all just actually happened by chance. Like, I'd played in bands in Melbourne for years, and I'd always played with friends and people I knew from the scene. But with Heads, it was completely random, and I didn't know the guys beforehand and stuff. So
okay.
Yeah, well, I turned 30 and decided that I wanted to change my life, basically, and do something different. So I sold all my stuff and packed up and moved to Berlin, and got to Berlin, and then was missing playing shows and looking to start a new band. And a friend of mine said to me, if you want to find musicians in Berlin, you should go on Craigslist. Coming from Australia, I'd never really used Craigslist before, and I had like a bit of a chip on my shoulder about it, I guess. I was like, I don't need to go.
Who's Craig? Why would I care about being the list of some fella named Craig?
I don't want to be on that guy's list. Fuck that. And,
I don't even like Craig. Who the hell does he think he is? How dare he?
But yeah, so I just completely randomly found those guys on Craigslist, and we didn't
really. So it was like there was like an ad of some kind. It was just like, well, how specific was the ad? Was it naming bands, or was it what was actually, the?
All it said, it was just a headline that said bass player looking for new project, and I thought I'll click on that, and then on it he'd listed the Jesus Lizard, McCluskey, and like a bunch of bands I really like with pretty beefy bass tones. And it was Chris.
Right. Proper girthy bass rather than maybe slapping and popping necessarily. No offense to the slappers and poppers of the world, but.
So then, and he had a link to like a couple of examples of just basically some riffs that he'd put on SoundCloud. And I wrote some ideas over the top of that, like vocals and guitars, mixed it, sent it back to him, and we just, then the band was sort of born from there. And we started jamming, and Chris was playing in a band called The Ocean at the time, which is this German atmospheric metal band, and touring quite a lot. So for the first few months of the band, we were just corresponding, sending ideas back and forth. And our drummer, Peter, was on the road crew for The Ocean at the time. He was like their backliner drum tech or something. And he heard the ideas that we were sending back and forth, wanted to get involved, and then that was it. We had a band, like fairly random band, and now 6 years later, still going.
Yeah, I mean, did you expect it that was this your first hit? Like, was this like your first kind of experience playing with folks, or did you have a few kind of like, well, no, not so much?
Pretty much,
because that's some longevity. You know, that's longer than a lot of bands are that have quite a bit more preparation. Let's put it that way. And you guys are still creatively viable and doing cool stuff, and that's fantastic.
Cheers. Yeah. Before that, I'd never actually really played music seriously, I guess you'd say. You know, like I just kicked around in Melbourne, playing in bands with mates, and it was always like, it was the kind of bands where it's more about hanging out, really, than anything else.
I know what you're talking about when you say that, yeah.
Yeah, which was great fun, you know, but all through my 20s, that's mostly what I was doing, was just playing in bands with friends, drinking beers, occasionally
having
going
a laugh.
Yeah, going on tour for like 3 days, you know. Oh, let's go on tour, and that was like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we'd all be back at work on Monday.
Right.
So this band was the first time I'd actually really put time and effort into a band and music, and actually taken it seriously and put a lot of my focus into the music.
Did you have like an end goal in mind as far as what kind of thing you wanted? I mean, were you wanting to apply yourself to this and have like, yeah, I want this to be the thing. I want this to be the band that does things. Like what was the level of kind of pre-planning with that? And when I say that, I mean like when you were getting together, you know, with Chris and Peter, that were you asking for their availability for like how long can you be gone on tour? You know, like how much was it that, and how much was it like, oh, this is something worthwhile? You know, let's invest this amount of time into it. Like, what was the pre-determination for it, and what was the things that happened with it that were more naturally based?
Yeah, well, it's actually a bit silly now, but the only goal that I had at that time, I remember, was I just wanted to do a tour of Europe. I was like, I'm going to live in Berlin for a year. I just want to like do some cool...
It's a lot easier to tour in Europe when you're starting in Europe, as it turns out. So,
yeah. That was the extent of my goals. It was like, I was really set on, like I just really wanted to tour Europe and just like tick that box as an Australian kind of thing.
Sure.
But then when we actually started making music, and then we started getting some really good responses from the music, and people started buying the records and coming to the shows, then I started really enjoying it, and like I could put a lot more time and a lot more effort into this because it's actually viable. It's actually a thing. So
people
I guess
were
I'm
responding to it in a way that, you know, it would imply that if you put a little more effort into it, then you might get some rewards out of it rather than just the precursory throwing it into a void necessarily.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It was, that sort of positive feedback kept me going. Yeah, it's cool. I guess I'm probably a bit of a late bloomer, or maybe a bit of an anomaly like that, whereas most people I know who play music really put a lot of time into it in their teens and 20s and all that stuff. I didn't really do that, I guess. I turned 18 when I turned 30.
Right. Well, you know, it's Bukowski didn't start writing until he was 35, you know. Yeah. So tell me about that first record. So that's the one that was like 2015. I think it's a self-titled one, right?
Yeah. So that was just like us jamming, put down a bunch of ideas, and we drove to Switzerland to record it with a friend. There's a huge live venue in a city there called La Chaux de Fonds, and there's a big live venue there called Bikini Test, and we wanted to track the whole thing live in the middle of the room.
It's called Bikini Test, is that what you said?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So we drove down to Switzerland.
Evocative image, yeah.
Yeah. We all wore bikinis during the tracking.
Yeah.
And,
It's compulsory.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we just tracked the whole thing live in this big room, and it was cool. It was very organic. But on the way there, this was my first kind of touring experience, even though it wasn't really playing shows. But we were like driving to Switzerland from Berlin as a band to record. Right. So I felt like, oh, I'm doing it, like I'm actually on the road and I'm doing this thing I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
And
how long did that last?
It lasted until we hit the border to Switzerland.
Right.
Because we come into the border, and I think I was driving and I was listening to Wu-Tang Clan or something like that.
As one does, yes.
Ill-advised at this stage, unfortunately, because as we came up to this kind of random-looking silver building, and then the guys were like, oh, I think this is the border. I'm like, oh, yeah, cool. And usually at the border to Switzerland, you just drive straight through. Maybe they check your passports, maybe not. But these guys just stepped out in front of the van. And then next thing we knew, there was all these border guards, and they're pulling us out of the van. They ended up,
Lord.
Yeah, they put us in individual cells, strip searched us, pulled the whole van apart. We were there for like 4 or 5 hours. It's pretty weird. Yeah.
So, not big Wu-Tang fans, these guys, then?
Nah.
As it turns out. Not down with the Wu.
We were laughing afterwards as well, because we were like, man, we must be the most boring band on the planet, because we didn't have a single, We had a whole bunch.
Crazy balls, no heroin. Like,
not even half a joint, nothing. All we had was all these bottles of pasta sauce, because everything's too expensive in Switzerland, so we bought cheap pasta sauce to eat for the week on the way. That was it.
Wait, did they like open up the pasta sauce to see if there's any contraband or anything in it?
I don't think so.
Okay, yeah. That's good, because you should not defile a man's pasta sauce.
One of them did have sauce on his mustache, though.
Brilliant. So you go to Bikini Test. You track the first record. What kind of things are you thinking about for sounds and stuff when you're making that one? Like, did you have any records in mind? Were you thinking about it in terms of like achieving certain things with making the record, or is it more of documenting the songs as they were at that moment in time?
I think the only thing we all agreed on was that we wanted a huge sound. That was like it was like, oh, we want it to sound huge. And the Ocean had recorded a record there, or they'd recorded the drums for a record there in the past, and the drums just sounded absolutely massive. So that was a big part of the decision to do it there. And yeah, it was really just about getting a very organic sound, capturing the way the band actually sounded playing together in that room. And I think
I bring it up because it does seem like you've like the records kind of give that as a priority of like, hey, this is not like, hey, let's use the latest technology to auto-tune something or throw in a saxophone or whatever, just something that won't sound dated later. It's like, no, we want to be the rock band in the room, and we want to have that documented the best possible way that we can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, it's definitely got quite a few mistakes on there, and some of the singing's a bit pitchy at times and all this kind of stuff. So it's a pretty real record in that sense.
It is. I mean, did you have how many records have you made before that?
Me personally, probably 3 or 4, but of varying quality as well. Like really like the kinds of records you make when you're 18. Yeah. And you guys won the Battle of the Bands. You get 3.5 hours in this recording studio. It's actually just in some guy's backyard, and he doesn't know how to use half the gear.
Wants to be somewhere else desperately the entire time.
Yeah.
Uses an excuse to try out his new plugins or something. Yeah.
Exactly. Why is there a flanger on all the cymbals, And then you get the CD back. It's like, is that what we sound like?
Yeah.
So I'd made those kind of records before this, and then I'd put time into a couple of slightly more serious albums, but again, really with no budget, making it as quickly and cheaply as possible.
Right.
Just with mates, you know.
Finances kind of being a predominant concern, you know, rather than like what can we do rather than what do we want to do.
Yeah, exactly. If we're going to spend this much on recording the record, then we need to spend this much on beer and this much on pizza.
AKA the Cosmic Psycho's philosophy, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's real.
That's the vibe.
So I'm interested in hearing about the kind of cultural change for, you know, being someone that, because you were born and bred Australian, right? And then you decided to uproot your life and try something different. Ended up in Berlin, worst places in the world for being an artist, you know, not so bad. But did you already speak German? I mean, what kind of cultural encounters and adventures did you have there? Like, was the adjustment quick? Was it difficult? Like, how did you feel about that change up?
The adjustment was long and slow and painful, while also being enjoyable, if that makes any sense. Like, it is quite different. Berlin's a great place, of course, but there are very big cultural differences between German mentalities and Australian mentalities that sometimes is difficult. Right. It requires a bit of understanding from both sides. Like, very simple one, but being on time. Like, for an Australian, if you say 10 o'clock, that means like 10:15. And for a German,
it's a polite suggestion, yeah.
Yeah. And for a German, that means 10:45. So they're always sitting around for half an hour before I get anywhere.
Quietly or not so quietly judging you the entire time.
Yeah. And I didn't speak any German. I learnt it, and I can speak now. I lived there for 7 years in the end. I loved it, but very different. The main thing for me was that Berlin's such an inspiring place artistically.
Yeah, well, of course. There's an incredible history to that city.
Yeah, and there's so many amazing musicians and artists and all kinds of people living there. It's just such an incredible place for creativity. And then I found all of a sudden that I personally had a lot more free time. So rather than working like a regular full-time job in Australia and then trying to play in a band on the weekend and then going back to work on Monday morning exhausted, all of a sudden I had time that I could put into music, and it was great.
Yeah, the thing I refer to that you were speaking about is the killing yourself to live aspect of playing music, where you spend so much time just trying to maintain so that you can have the time to play your music, and then by the time you can actually do it, it's like, oh well, I don't have any energy to do this now, and you know, or you get like a glimpse of like, wow, I bet this would be cool if we could do this just a little bit more. That would be nice.
Yeah, it's tough.
What did you for living in Berlin specifically? I mean, did you find that folks were like welcoming to you, like as a newcomer and as a Auslander?
Yeah, yeah. Generally, like Berlin is a city that's just completely full of Auslanders, you know.
Yeah.
So by and large, most people were welcoming and friendly. There were definitely some people who were like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" You know. But you're gonna get that anywhere. If you come into a new scene, there's always going to be a few people who are territorial or
generally resentful at your existence for whatever reason that you can't immediately determine or quantify.
Yeah, exactly. Like you get this kind of like, I hate that guy. And then it's like, well, have you met that guy? Why do you hate that guy? And it's like, I don't know, I just hate him. So you get a bit of that stuff. But by and large, people were actually really cool and welcoming.
And then, you know, times that by 1,000 if you have dark skin, let's say, or something along those lines, I'm sure, you know?
Yeah, I can't imagine how hard that must be. Yeah.
So when you start in with Heads and you got that first record, it was you did some touring with Mets, right? That was still fairly early on. That was like about 5 years ago, right? So 2015, something along those lines.
Yeah, those were like some of our very first shows. So I think maybe my 5th, 6th, 7th kind of shows with the band were with Mets in Germany, which was really a kind of a turning point for me in terms of like, oh, I could spend a lot more time doing this. You know?
Right, sure, yeah.
This is great.
I mean, did you find that, I mean, was the band where you wanted it to be at that point? Did you have any like discoveries or anything, especially, you know, playing with a prestigious band and, you know, and a good band and not wanting to blow it too, you know, wanting to hold your own.
Yeah.
I'm driving at something because I have a friend who, an ex-bandmate actually, who said that he always feels that a band has to play about 10 shows before they really know who they are.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I don't know why it's arbitrarily 10, but I always think about that whenever I see new bands. Like, oh, what show number is this? You know?
Yeah. I feel like with us it was about 50 shows before we...
Really? Okay. Well, you know, hey.
I feel like
we already established it.
Yeah, I feel like we've only really hit our stride live kind of recently, actually, like last year-ish, year before, because, I mean, I personally had never sang in bands, really, up until very recently, too. I was always just kind of playing guitar, and, yeah, I was just kicking around playing guitar for people, mostly. So that's been
Did you want to? Like, were you, like, secretly writing lyrics with the idea that maybe you'd do something, or was it just something that never really occurred to you?
It never really occurred to me, yeah. I read a lot, and I'm like, my mum's an English literature teacher, and I'm like right into the English language. And I think at one point I just kind of got a little bit fed up of playing in bands where I didn't like the lyrics of the singer. And eventually I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do it myself.
Well, and the reason why I'm going down that line of questioning is because it does seem like the lyrics are very literate. Like they're, you know, without necessarily being overly precious or pretentious about it, you know, there's some meat behind it, and it's interesting to say that you weren't originally doing vocals, because it seems like there's a lot of thought that's been put into it. So it's interesting that it would be something that you come at kind of later in life, but it seems like you attacked it pretty hard.
Yeah.
When you did. I mean, did you have like lyricists and vocalists and singers from people so in mind that you wanted to try to, you know, pull from, or not necessarily steal from, but try to put yourself in that kind of image? Like who were the people that you were thinking of when you were wanting to be the type of lyricist and vocalist that you ended up being?
Honestly, lyrically, nobody consciously. Like there's heaps of singers where I love what they're saying and I love how they say it, and I find their lyrics inspiring, and I'm sure I'm being inspired by stuff all the time without realizing it as well. But in terms of like consciously aspiring to be like a particular songwriter or a particular lyricist, there was nobody. I just really feel like I have something that I want to say, and then I just put pen to paper and I just have to say it. I've realized in the last few years that I become an unhappy person if I'm not expressing myself creatively. I'm not able to say this thing hurt me, or I'm unhappy about this, or this thing's painful, or whatever. If I can't say that creatively, then I actually get really unhappy.
Right.
So I have this need, you know.
Yeah, no, and then, you know, there's a drive behind it. And it was more just sort of, you know, not the who are you ripping off, but I mean everyone takes influence from somewhere. You know what I mean? Just to clarify.
All right, his name's Larry and he lives next door. And,
yeah, exactly.
Just don't tell him.
He does fine work when he plays a ska band, a reprehensible genre. Most illiterate ska songs you've never heard.
Well, back to your earlier question, I definitely remember playing those shows with Mets and then being like, well, we've got a really, really long way to go as a live band if we want to.
Yeah, because they're a ripper live act. Like it's a kind of force of nature. Like it's like a brutalist assault almost to a certain degree, right? So
it's killer. It's so good. And then they get off stage and then they're just such nice people as well. So that was very formative, and I feel really lucky that we got to do that so early as a band. And that was definitely very inspiring for me.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
I mean, did you take away things from that presentation that you're like, we need to do things more like this, or informed what you were doing based on seeing them, do their thing and like working relatively effortlessly as a finely tuned machine when they do it?
Yeah, definitely just the way they just ripped it. And then managed to be kind of cool as well.
Yeah.
Where I found that I was like trying to talk on stage and have a bit of on-stage banter, and I guess just like anything else, if you haven't really done it before, you're not going to be any good at it. And I found that I was coming off stage and just going, what the hell was, like, why did I say that? That was so,
yeah.
So I realized I had to up my onstage banter game, and like there was a lot of things to learn. Yeah.
Well, I think that's, if I was teaching rock and roll school, I would definitely attempt to teach a banter class, and which is also to say that do not do it unless you are of a certain skill level, because you'll learn to regret it, and your bandmates certainly will learn to regret it as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. You're not only kind of embarrassing yourself, you're also embarrassing everyone standing on stage with you.
Secondhand embarrassment is a real thing.
Yeah.
So you're playing those early shows with Mets, but what I find interesting is that you also did the run shows with Protomartyr, very different kind of band, like very different kind of presentation. But that said, like, it's like, no, it works. It seems like it would work from an outside perspective. I mean, did you feel that that was a good pairing? Did you feel like there was a lot of things that could you get over on the Protomartyr crowd? Were they open to what you were doing?
Yeah, I felt like they were. I felt like that somehow worked as well, because I guess we heads have some sort of spoken word elements at times, and there's a general
spoken word core.
Yeah. There's like a general kind of discontent, disillusionment that kind of fits with both of those bands, I guess.
Just manifests in a slightly different way, perhaps, but
Yeah, just get up on stage and be kind of unhappy, and the crowd accepted us.
There's a great Theory of Ruin, Alex Newport's least known band, has a song called "Let's Get Depressed," which I always liked very much as a song title.
Nice. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah. So then, as you're exploring, doing actual European tours, as you're exploring being, a person playing in a band, and you're doing it largely in this other country, this other part of the world, and culturally there are things that are different. So did you think that, again, just as you as a human being had to adjust, like were there any kind of weird adjustment periods, or in anything that was sort of a clash of cultures that happened early on with these shows?
Fully, yeah, totally. I feel like it took about 2 years for me to kind of really start to feel comfortable. There's a certain kind of directness that Germans can have in general, and then Australians tend to have a far less direct, yeah, no worries, mate, everything's no worries, even when really maybe there are some worries, whereas with Germans, it's like, how are you? I'm terrible. I have a headache and I didn't sleep. So that's like
I have irritable bowels right now. Oh wow,
Yeah.
I didn't expect you to say that. Okay.
So there's this kind of like, particularly in East Germany, I guess, and I'm completely generalizing here, but
That's fine. You've heard the show.
yeah. There's sort of a confrontational standoffishness that opens relationships often. So you meet someone
Right,
and
sure.
the relationship opens with this sort of confrontation and a kind of unspoken confrontation, I guess. And if you then shy away from that, no respect for you. But if you stand up to that and you're like equally as confrontational in return, then you're best mates.
It sounds like prison. I mean,
it is. It is.
maybe not the best mates part, but yeah. Okay.
But I came to really love this thing about Berlin, especially, but East Germany too, where like no one was sort of unnecessarily interested in what you were doing, and they kind of just don't really give a shit about, like, if it's someone you don't know,
Right.
and you walk into a bar and you're like, "Can I have a beer?" They're like, "Cool, here's a beer," and that's it. They don't want anything else from you. They don't, there's nothing else. And initially, I was like, "Oh, everybody hates me," but then after a couple of
just
years,
taking the worst possible interpretation of that. Yeah, exactly.
It's me. But then after a couple of years, I was like, nobody is overly intrusive, so I can just be completely anonymous, and this is awesome. So I actually came to really love that.
Kind of taking the elements that some might take as a negative and turning that around into something, because I mean, you mentioned you were uprooting your life and changing, everything about your life. So
yeah,
I suppose how you choose to perceive things and whether you choose to take certain things personally or something along those lines could definitely be part of that as well.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a growth. It's just a personal growth.
Yeah. Or as they say, personal growth. Yes. So then I think it was 2017. I know you played some shows with the Buildings and Fashion Week. Fantastic folks, fantastic, great American noise rock bands. Did you feel there was affinity and common cause like immediately with those guys? Did you feel that like you were of one mind? It kind of seemed like it was a bromance from afar.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. We got along really well from the beginning. And I still really consider those guys friends. We came to the US in 2018, and the last show was in Minneapolis, and we got to do that with Buildings, and we stayed at their house, and it was like really like a bit of a reunion. It was super nice.
Did Brian put on the Michael Myers mask and dance around to that smell with a big butcher knife?
Unfortunately not.
That was real high at the time, and that never happens.
That sounds like quite the experience, Conan.
I was gonna say, it's a very specific ask. I didn't know if you pulled it on all the touring bands or just us, but
I'm definitely going to ask him now. Next time. Yeah.
I might have video of it somewhere, but I don't know.
Oh, please send that to me.
I'll look around for it. Yeah.
That was fun. We had a really good time, and with Buildings, we went through Spain and the south of France and stuff, and did like a bunch of touristy things together, like climbing a sand dune and looking at a church and eating a croissant. It was
sure, yeah, totally.
It was really nice, yeah. And that's the stuff about touring as well that's so addictive too. I think it's not just the shows; it's also obviously the friendship and the camaraderie and the sand dunes. It's great.
Yeah, that was something where I remember thinking two things about seeing that routing. One of which is like, oh, they're playing a lot of like the best places in those cities, and they're playing with some of the best bands. That's awesome. And then also being like, so they're just in Minneapolis? They're not going. Oh, okay, interesting. But then again, the United States of America is huge. And takes a very long time to traverse, and some areas are less inclined to like weirder music than others too. So I both was surprised and not surprised at all at the same time.
Yeah, I also found out that I'm kind of built for touring. I only realized this once I actually started doing it. But I can just,
and that's really the only way you ever know is if you start doing it.
Yeah. But not everyone likes it as much as I do and wants to do it for as long as I do, I guess, as well. Whereas I just kind of stay on the road and keep playing shows. But my bandmates don't always like to do such long tours, which is, that's cool. We had planned, we were going to come back to the States in 2020 and probably try and do some West Coast stuff and maybe Texas and places like this that we hadn't been to before. Maybe Milwaukee, but yeah, maybe next year. I've never actually been to Milwaukee. My only association is Wayne's World, I feel like.
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, if you like beer, Milwaukee is a great place. There's just a million different breweries, and they're all great. It's all, the most overrepresented easy drinking beer is better than most places craft beer. You know what I mean? It's very it is a town that likes its drinking, but there's a very long history of cool and interesting music and really cool folks as well. I mean, I know it before I lived here. I know it from touring, and always, I think it took 4 or 5 times before we ever had a good show in Chicago, but Milwaukee was great from the jump and always was. And I think it's an underrated city, and it bums me out that so many tours will skip it sometimes. They'll play Madison and Chicago or Minneapolis and Chicago, and it's like, oh, well, you're kind of missing out. But then Milwaukee can also fall prey to something that I know happens in other places as well, which is to say people don't come out for shows that they should sometimes.
Yeah.
The cool kids got to give it the okay, whether they're going to admit it or not. But that's certainly not just a Milwaukee thing. Don't get me wrong. But it's something I've noticed far more living here than visiting. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So then tell me how you came to recording Collider and that record and how that came to be. And, what did you learn off of the first one? Obviously, you'd just been a band longer at that point. You'd played a lot more shows. It was louder and angrier almost, right? A little bit more finely honed of what you did. What was in the thought process with doing that one? What was that recording process like?
So that one was I personally paid a lot more attention to detail on that record. So the first one was let's get in and be a band and track everything live and cool, done. But then after a couple of years of sort of playing shows on it and listening back to it and being like, I probably could have put a bit more time into the vocals there, or
Yeah, you don't get a merit badge for leaving everything completely unadorned.
Yeah, exactly. So Collider, I decided to spend a lot more time working on details, and I really pre-production. I spent hours and hours and hours, weeks and months working on lyrics, working on guitar lines. And as a whole band, we put a lot more effort and time into arrangements and making more of a complex and detailed album, I guess. And then recording, we spent 3 weeks at a friend's studio, which is about 45 minutes away from the city of Nuremberg in Germany. And it's a place called Ghost City, which we recorded with a friend of ours called Jan Kirscher. And there's no distractions there whatsoever. So it's an old...
fantastic. Yeah. So you're just able to create, and you aren't going to have people wandering off to go do this fun thing or that fun thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's live there, sleep there, eat there. And it was a bit like The Shining, I guess. Like I spent 3 weeks there because I also have to be part of the whole process because I'm there for the tracking, and then I'm there for the guitar overdubs, and then I'm there for the vocals. So I just lived and breathed that album for 3 weeks, and I think I only actually left the studio twice in 3 weeks to like go walk around in the woods on my own. So it was a very
just take a breather of some kind.
yeah, it was very immersive, quite an intense experience. But I feel like we captured what we wanted to capture on the album.
Yes, you felt like it did what you wanted it to do, as far as the kind of record you wanted to make and doing justice to those songs and things along those lines.
Yeah, definitely. It was the first time I'd ever put that much time and effort into anything, and it felt like it was worth it in the end.
Did you find that? How'd you feel about the reaction?
Yeah, I think the thing with Heads tends to be people are either like, yeah, that band, yeah, I don't really like them, or or they're like, this is the thing that describes my soul and my deepest, darkest. So people tend to either be kind of obsessed with it or not really fussed, which is cool, in that, like, I've had people come up to me after shows and write to me and all kinds of things and say, your album Collider is like a self-help record for me, or
it's awesome. Yeah.
I've had this like a heap of times with a whole bunch of different people who are like, these songs speak to me, it's helped me through some difficult stuff, which is like, those songs are about pain for me personally as well. So if people can connect to it on that level and it's helpful for them in their life, awesome. I couldn't ask for more in terms of that.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of gives you an idea of it being a little more important than the people that are like, oh yeah, whatever, those guys, all right, well, it's not for them. That's fine. It's okay. It's for the people that's for, and it has a positive reaction in the world, and no one can ever take that away from you, nor should they try.
Yeah.
So then, and around that time too, that's when you played with some American bands. I know you did a bunch of shows with Multicult, Horrors, right? You played with Horrors and Vinkus, right? I mean, I think you did there's a whole run of like basically like the new the new wave of American noise rock bands kind of coming through. It was like, oh, they're playing with Heads. Okay, cool. Like, oh, they're the band that plays with all the bands that they comes through.
Yeah. We did a run, a US run with Vinkus and Multicult, which was awesome. And like everyone in those bands was just so hospitable and welcoming and helpful. I've really heard that about touring in the US, but I'd never experienced it personally. But like the payment or the venues or the conditions are sometimes nicer and cushier in Europe. Like you get dinner in a hotel and breakfast and stuff.
I was gonna say it's a reasonable assumption, yes.
But then the bands in the US will, like, they make up for that because they go out of their way to be so hospitable, and they put you on the good slot, and they let you use their gear, and here you crash at my mate's place, you can sleep on my couch. It's just It's awesome.
Well, and as someone who kind of came to touring somewhat later, I mean, did you find that type of interaction, that type of community building, like, how did that affect you? Was that something where you were like kind of taking it to heart as being part of a larger whole or something along those lines? I mean, because it kind of seems like you guys slotted right in pretty easily, and for good reason. It's sort of, I think the genre of music is in and of itself a bit of a BS detector.
Yeah.
But by the same token, you never know. Like, people can be dicks too in any genre of music. So,
Yeah.
But did you find that did you feel like you were being that there was like an emerging part of a community as far as that goes, or was it just something where, okay, we're all just doing the thing and making it on best we can?
Oh, fully part of the community, and people definitely helped us feel part of a community. It's beautiful, man. Like, if I think about it now, I have friends in countries and cities and places all over the world that I know through music and through, for me, like a relatively short time
right
in touring music. But I have people I consider good friends all over the world, and they're also like fast friendships, like they're people that you get in a van with and you play 3 shows with or something like that, and you spend like quite an intense time together, but only for a few days, and then you don't see them again for 4 years, but you still consider them, this person's a really good mate of mine.
So you can kind of pick right up where you left off when you see them again too, because you have that, what I imagine to a much lesser degree it must be for people that are like war buddies or something along those lines, not to belittle the act of war or the act of being a soldier, but it is that sort of deep bond and friendship that only can happen with a certain type of experience and seeing the world through a certain way in a certain lens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's beautiful.
So the new record, Push, it's much smaller gap of time between the second one and the third one than the first and the second one.
Yeah.
How did these songs all come to pass? Like, how was this something where, it's not like you guys were sitting around doing nothing. Like, you were pretty busy as a band. Like, what was the impetus behind this record, and what drove you to being like, okay, this is what we're gonna do now? Like, did you have the idea like we're gonna do another record, or was it just the songs kind of came out naturally at that time? Like, how did Push as a record come to be?
I really didn't want to take 3 years between records again. I really, really wanted things to happen a bit more quickly, because I feel like I got stuff I need to say. That's part of, that's the songwriting for me, is I have to say this thing. And yeah, being busy people and in different projects and stuff, we just decided, you know what, we're going to do it. We're going to make it this year. We gave ourselves a date, I think, which was like about 9 or 10 weeks away from where we were at that time. We're like, all right,
wow.
You know what? Yeah. The opposite
Nothing
of
like working with a deadline. Yeah, I was going to say, that's quite the whiplash from process.
Yeah. And our drummer, Peter, had joined The Ocean as a full-time member. So he used to be their roadie and then became their synth player. So we got a new drummer in. And Peter used to live in Hamburg while me and Chris lived in Berlin. So that made rehearsals and stuff quite complicated. It wasn't always easy. So we recruited a new drummer, a guy called Nick Stockman, who lives in Berlin as well. And we're like, all right, the 3 of us are in Berlin. We have our own studio rehearsal space in a basement somewhere. We got 9 weeks. Let's do it. Let's just write an album. And then we rehearsed almost every day for like 9 weeks. Like, we just went in and we just worked. And it was kind of like we finished rehearsal, on Sunday night and turned our amps off. And then Monday morning we set up. We drove to the studio, set up, and started recording. So it was really no space, just get it done, which is sort of part of why the record's called Push, I guess. We just really...
it's a very literalist translation.
Pushed it out.
But it's something where... did you feel extra pressure that you were putting on yourselves because of that?
I loved it. I personally really like pressure.
Right.
I can't speak for the other guys, but for me, pressure is definitely a good thing. I played a lot of basketball and sports and stuff growing up, and if put a bit of pressure on, you can make things work in a different way, I think. So it was good. Because I think if we hadn't done that, if we hadn't gone like, here's a deadline, we'd probably still be writing the album now.
Right. And there's there's just saying that for some pressure will break you, and for others the pressure makes a diamond, and it just depends on the person.
Yeah. I think as a band we definitely responded to that pressure. I'm really proud of that album.
It's an interesting record. I mean, I certainly like it. Did you want to do? I got to be mindful of time here, since we had a little bit of a kerfuffle, which is literally the only allusion I will make to that. But every once in a while, I'll go through this thing. We'll just go through song by song.
Yeah,
and you can just tell me a little bit about anything you like about that, whether it's about the lyrics, with the song itself, like the recording process, whatever springs to mind on it. Does that sound good?
Let's do it.
All right. So first one of the records, Empty Towns.
So this one has Christoph Hahn from Swans playing lap steel, which I just love. I love the idea that he's playing lap steel on it.
And it's a bold choice too to have that as the first one too, because it's sort of like, oh, what? Interesting.
Yeah. So it's a bass loop from Chris. He's got some huge industrial loop going, and then Christoph Hahn came in, played some lap steel over the top of that, and then I basically riffed on the top of his lap steel. So I was able to bounce my vocals off the guy from Swans, it's pretty fun for me.
Not bad. Not bad. So vocally, where were you coming at with that one?
I tend not to explain too much what's going on lyrically, because I really like to leave it open to interpretation for people, and especially when I have people come up to me like, hey man, your album is really helpful for me. I want to leave that for them.
You don't want to push their interpretation away by being, well, actually, it's about it.
Yeah. Exactly. Actually, man, that song's about a banana.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. But
I used to like it.
But lyrically, that song calls forward to the last song on the record, which it's connected to, and it also
they almost seem like bookends.
Yeah,
like the records are like those songs are like bookends.
Exactly, and they call back and forth to each other. There's a few key lyrical phrases, and then there's a bunch of lyrical phrases that happen throughout the record on different songs, and they're all. So actually, lyrically, the whole album's kind of connected, but I won't give any more detail than that.
It's banana themed. It's okay. So then, how about second song, Weather Beaten?
This has got to be just about the most fun song to play live ever for me. It's super heavy. It's pretty heavy. I can just kind of yell the whole time. This song was just very organic. We wrote it in the room. It was heavy. We're like, cool, let's keep it heavy. Tracked it live in the studio. That's it.
It's done. You don't need any sousaphone. You don't need any any string sections necessarily. Sometimes it works. Sometimes that just does what it's supposed to do, and don't just get out of the way.
Yeah, it was one of those ones where as soon as it's written, it's like, okay, we're not touching that song. It's done.
Yeah.
It's like...
Right. How about Push You Out to Sea?
This one has a couple of guests on it. A guy called Matthias Veit, who plays in a German band called Radar, which is a sort of instrumental Amazing instrumental German band, sort of somewhere in the vein of like Bohren and the Club of Gore kind of style. So Matthias plays a bit of extra guitar on there, some nice bends in the verses.
Yeah.
And then my wife, Rosa Mercedes, plays some feedback guitar in the middle section as well, which was super fun. She's usually a bass player and a singer, but she just happened to be in the studio when we were tracking some extra guitars in this, and we were like, you know what, just get some feedback on there. And she was, in typical fashion, was like, hell yes. Got in,
right.
Got in there and just immediately had the guitar up against the speaker, you know. Yeah.
How about Loyalty?
Loyalty, I enjoy this song because of the way that the pieces fall off at the end. So it's like a somewhat traditional song structure up until about halfway through, when we decided to just let the ending play out and do its own thing, and just slowly remove pieces, but really being quite patient. So over a couple of minutes, it sort of, we just slowly take away one little bit at a time until we're left with nothing. And we had a video made for that recently by an Australian filmmaker, a guy called.
That's right, yeah. I think you even have it as your default on one of the social media things. I can't remember what it was. Probably Facebook, I think, right? So is that the
he shot this video for us, and it's pretty interesting because it was filmed between Melbourne and country Victoria, but we filmed it in a former commune in rural Victoria. So it's like this sort of this hippie land commune where they were trying to create some new system of building houses out of mud, brick, and hay. That seemed to be about the extent of their philosophy as well.
I was gonna say, how did that work out for them? Okay.
Yeah.
Did they sort it?
Yeah, because the commune's, it's done, you know, it's over.
Yeah, we've achieved the goal. Check.
So we went
made
out
our
there.
mud hut.
Yeah, we went out there, and there's a bunch of mud huts, but most of them don't have the commune members living in them anymore. And I basically just walked around in the bush, and Wilson filmed me being a creep.
That's suitable for the song. That works.
You should see the outtakes.
Did you lay on the creep on the outtakes?
Yeah. There's a scene where I'm chopping wood, but didn't make the cut, unfortunately. It's pretty good.
Save it for the solo album.
Yeah.
Talk to me about Rusty Sling.
So this was initially going to be just a big instrumental piece, just like a sort of post-rocky instrumental song, which we hadn't really put on an album, anything like that before.
Yeah, it's a little different from some of the other songs. Yeah,
but I couldn't leave it alone, and I just had to put some vocals in there in the end, because it just, I don't know, that middle section, it just really felt like it needed something. So it became the instrumental post-rock song with vocals.
Got to throw them a bone now and again.
Yeah.
A post-rock bone. Nobody moves and everybody talks.
This one's also really fun to play live because I can kind of get into a bit of a character. So it's probably the fastest song we've ever played as a band. Initially, when we started, we had this thing where we were like, whatever we do, it's going to be slow, you know?
Yeah, it seemed very deliberate, almost, not quite Steamroller of Doom or anything, but just very deliberate, like very deliberately paced.
It was, yeah, it fully was. Like, we'd even write a song and then be like, let's slow it down a little bit, regularly in the beginning. And then Peter would, take 10 BPM off it and we'd play everything that much slower. We stopped doing that now and just let things, if they're fast, we've just kind of let them be fast. So this I reckon is the fastest song we've ever played, and I love doing it live because I can get into this character and just let it rip. It's good. It's good fun.
Lay into it. It was important.
This was pretty difficult to track vocally, because initially I had this vocal that was like a sort of almost like a stream of consciousness kind of improvising. It was made to sound like that, basically. So when I initially wrote the vocals on a demo, I wrote them and then worked them to make them sound as though it's sort of stream of consciousness-like, which was pretty challenging. But then to try and replicate that exactly in the studio later was even more challenging.
Right, because things that would have just came out extemporaneously very easily, you're now articulating it in a way that you're like, okay, where does it go from here? You're thinking about it rather than using the subconscious and the or like the cut up method, so to speak, mentally.
Yeah, exactly.
There's that short one now, Swarming Tide.
So this is like sort of an intro to the next song, Paradise.
But you put it as its own song. So was that for sequencing purposes, or did you specifically want it to be seen as its own thing?
Definitely want it to be its own standalone song. Yeah, and I feel like it stands on its own legs. So I really wanted it to be its own song and have its own meaning, but then lead into the next track.
Sure.
Yeah, but it was. I remember trying to track the guitars, because it's just guitars, and I wanted them to feel loose, but then be relatively in time. And I was having a really hard time getting the feel of it right. Excuse me. So, and we tried it with a click and like all this different stuff. No click, wasn't working. And then Christoph Bartelt is the guy who engineered the record. He plays in a German rock band called Cadaver. It was this amazing German metal band. And he's the drummer, and he's this incredible drummer. And it's a comparison that gets made a lot, but with Christoph, I think it really fits. He's, when he plays drums, he's like Animal from the Muppets. Like,
certainly, yeah.
I'm sure there's plenty of drummers who have that same comparison, but it's uncanny.
Yeah, I've played with a couple of them, but it's kind of it's an awesome shorthand because everybody knows what that means, Yeah. Everybody knows exactly what that means.
So he's a maniac, and then it's just me and him in the studio. It's pretty late at night, and I just can't get the feel of this guitar. And he is like, you know what? Let me play this bongo, and we're gonna do it like this.
Keep it real minimal, yeah.
Yeah, so he pulls like a bongo out of the corner of the room, and he's just sitting there very lightly, just tapping on it, and it worked.
Yeah.
First time, like total genius. But for me, it was amazing to see Christoph. He's also very tall. Like I'm tall. I'm like 6'3". He's like 6'7", 6'8".
Oh, jeez.
So to see, I'd only ever seen him playing drums like an absolute maniac. So to see, 6'8", Christoph just lightly tapping this bongo was good fun.
just tapping it away. So then, yeah. So Paradise. That's the that's kind of near the end from a perspective of sequencing, right? Did you have the sequencing in mind ahead of time, or was it something where that kind of let itself be known as you recorded the songs?
A bit of both. Pretty early on, I had an idea of the order I wanted things to go in, and once we had more of a solidified order, I could then work the lyrics as well to kind of fit that.
Right.
But this one has Christoph Hahn from Swans is on it again, playing this epic lap steel thing at the end. And that was really cool because we asked him to play on the record, and he was like, yeah, sure, why not? We didn't know him. And then the next day he's there in the studio. And
had you met him before, or was it just kind of, oh, okay, right on?
Yeah, none of us. So a friend of ours, a guy called Busty Grimm, was doing photo and video while we were tracking, and we were talking about maybe getting a lap steel player or someone to come in. And we spoke about, it'd be good, Christoph from Swans would be good. He lives in Berlin. And Busty was just hanging around with the camera, and he's like, I think I know someone who knows someone. I'll get you an email address. And within a couple of hours, he had an email address for me. And I sent an email, and then, a few hours later, got one back, and then he was in the studio within a day or two after that. It was almost too easy.
Nice. Yeah, I was going to say, it's the kind of thing where you keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, right?
Yeah. And then he just, we sent him a couple of tracks, and he came in and just played just the most beautiful lap steel on it. First take kind of stuff, just first take, perfect, cool, done, next. Yeah.
It's nice to have those people around.
Yeah.
We're not it's time to get the job done, and it's like, oh, there's the job. Okay, great, done. Okay, there we are.
You see the experience there, this is someone who's been doing it for a really, really long time.
Yeah.
Made
a lot of records with some pretty intense individuals.
Yeah. And with some amazing musicians.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, it's really like seeing someone who's at the top of their game.
Right. So then that brings us back around to the end, which is also the beginning, which is As Your Street Gets Deserted, which is the last song that kind of Mobius strip ties it back into the beginning piece.
Yeah. So lyrically, I call back to like a bunch of stuff that's happened on the record, but if people want to listen to it, I'll let them listen to it and make up their mind about that.
It's a banana.
My secret. And there's another guest on this one is a guy called Marcus Lipka, who plays in a sort of seminal German band called Eisenvater. So he plays like some extra guitars on this as well, like a sort of pad thing that happens. Yeah. And that's it.
That's it. That's the record push, and it's on all the things that you think a record like that would be on. You can find it, Spotify, Bandcamp is always preferred by me. Yeah. iTunes, all the places. They're, you guys lucked out in the fact that it came out right about the time that you can't actually do any touring. So that's a bit of a drag then.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I know a lot of people are in the same boat. So music industry, it's pretty tough, but yeah, bad timing for us. I think we put the record out on May 29, end of May, and I guess probably next year, hopefully, is when we'll.
We'll see. I'm hopeful about that too, but sometimes you see some folks and you just gotta wonder. Where it's like, okay, this is where you're choosing to make your stand, huh? All right.
Yeah, I have a solo project under Ed Fraser as well, and we had a bunch of shows booked with buildings in April, May through Europe. We were going to do this like I think 3 weeks with buildings through Finland and like all these places.
That's right.
And
I saw Travis on at Mortimer's at literally the second to last show that we played because we had to scrub that. We had to kill the rest of the dates. We got through 2 of them, and he was at the time. It was still like kind of maybe it was going to happen, maybe it wasn't, but he wasn't super hopeful about it.
I still remember being like 6 weeks out from that or something, and being like, "Oh, let's not cancel the tour yet." You know, like. Right. Everything's gonna be fine. It's all gonna blow over. And now I'm thinking, like, man, I hope we can play shows next year.
Yeah, exactly. As the goalposts move on even further, I mean, you're not the only one that felt that way, and that's been something that talking to folks during these quarantine times. It would have been possible to do that if everyone had just acted responsibly, but you see the problem.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, it's a bummer, and I'm sorry to hear it because I think it's a great record. It's like I'm really glad to have had you on to talk about it and talk about the rest of the band, and hopefully one of these days I'll actually get to see you play. That would be nice. When there are shows again. Whatever that happens to be.
Yeah. Hopefully next year in Milwaukee we'll have a beer.
There you go. Well, I'll have maybe even more than one. That's entirely possible. What? So you've heard the show. I close it out. One question: why do you do what you do?
Can't not do it.
Brilliant. It's a great talk, man.
Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, brother. And anytime. And watch out for those kangaroos, man.
Watch out for those bears.
Yeah, I was gonna say everyone in America thinks that there's like a kangaroo infestation, like they're just around, like hanging out all the time. And
there is.
I liken it to you. Oh, I think I'm repeating myself here. When Jem from Dead was on. People here think it's like how alligators are in Florida, which is to say constantly involved and like in the news all the time, like alligator involved news items, things along those lines. But
like alligator crashes birthday party kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite was the fella who grabbed an alligator and ran into like a liquor store and like tried to steal something, but he was like carrying the alligator the entire time. I mean, that's peak Florida man, pretty much. But alligators in the swimming pool, alligators interrupting, nursery rhymes at the preschool, just wandering through, alligators involved. So that is what people in the U.S. generally think of down under, is that it's just kangaroos 24/7, 365.
Well, there is this guy here who grabbed a kangaroo and carried it into a liquor store and they put a bunch of beers in its pouch and then he ran out again.
History doesn't repeat itself, but sometimes it rhymes. Ed, great talking to you, man.
You too.
We'll do it again sometime.
Take it easy.
All right, brother. Take care.
Ciao, ciao.
All right. So let's hear a song from the record. This is going to be... Off of the record push. This is the band Heads. Right on. Thanks for listening, everybody.
steady stream of faces that don't live here no more. So with this, I shake off, I take a final dive. I cut through the stifling silence, I let the words come. And as your shimmering street is swallowed up by desert, as your shivering ship sinks to the bottom of the ocean, as your shaking leaf blows out to sea, I inhale, I cut through the silence, I let the words come, I'm out.
Okay, as your street gets deserted, heads. That's a closing song on the record.
Is this thing on?
Push. And before that, of course, we had Rusty Sling. So get those in all their own places to get records, man. Headsnoise.bandcamp.com. Head, Spotify, iTunes, all that business. There's a couple videos and stuff. They're on Instagram. They're on, the places that you think that a band might be on, perhaps.
Is this thing on?
Well, that was lovely. I think I'm 4 for 4 with the kangaroo reference for Australian guests. I'll have to think about it. Let me know if I'm not.
As we come to the close of our broadcast day.
The name of this show is Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. Thank you so much for listening to it.
This is my farewell transmission.
This show airs on Radio Nope, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific.
Signing off.
Sometime in the morning in Melbourne,
Mr. and Mrs. America.
Victoria.
All the ships at sea. Anyone within the sound of my voice.
ProtonicReversal.com for the archives. Anywhere you get your podcasts, you can find this.
I've got 50,000 watts of power.
Thanks for sharing it around. Thanks for letting people know about it. Liking it, writing reviews, all that stuff helps.
Ionize the air.
Patreon.com/Protonic Reversal. $1 a month will get you episodes sooner if you want to hear them.
This microphone turns sound into electricity.
Some good stuff coming up as always. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you.
Can you hear me now?
Stay safe.
Out on Route 128, in the dark and lonely.
Take it easy.
I got my radio on.
Take it easy.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on Earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. But there is no special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Is it really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, got my radio on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? This is a test! If this had been a real emergency,